as a mother of neurodiverse children, I think it's so important to understand that when you design, when you are facilitating, when you are communicating, you need to think about the differences and the preferences of those that you're communicating with. Mood memory is about how you make somebody feel, is what stays with them more than anything that you said. They might not remember a word of the conversation, but they remember how they felt in the conversation.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Dhanda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. Dear friend, thank you so much for joining me on the Superpower School podcast. I'm your host, Paddy Dhanda. On today's show, I have Michelle Tillis Lederman. She's an expert on workplace communications and relationships, named by Forbes as one of the top 25 networking experts and one of the top 30 communications professionals in the world by Global Gurus. Michelle is the author of 4 books, including the internationally known 11 Laws of Likability and her latest, The Connector's Advantage. Michelle is a connection creator and CEO of Executive Essentials, which provides customized communications and leadership programs for Fortune 500 nonprofit, university, and government clients. A former finance executive and NYU professor, Michelle is a regular in the media, appearing on NBC, CBS, Fox, NPR, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNBC, and others. Michelle is known for helping people work better together and advance their individual impact. Welcome, Michelle, to the show.
Thank you, Patty. Happy to be here.
Wow, that was a long intro. Probably the longest I've ever done.
Oh my. And that's the mini version.
Well, it just goes to show you've got so many accolades in there. Like, there is just so much experience that I think we're going to tap into today. The fact that you've been on all of these amazing media channels is super cool. So I'm speaking to a bit of a celebrity, I think, already.
I'm here to impart whatever value I can on your audience.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I think I know the answer to this, but which superpower would you like to bring to this particular episode?
I'm sure you already know. Connection, of course.
Oh, brilliant. And I think in today's world, connection is one of the major superpowers that we all need, especially in this tech world and AI world that we're moving into as well. So really excited
More
to hear.
important than ever. And, I think with the shift in the workplace post-COVID and during COVID, where we are no longer physically in each other's space as much as we used to be, that connection has, become more tenuous, right? And so we have to be more intentional about ensuring that we build and create and nurture it.
Absolutely. And I keep getting told that this new generation are struggling with connection. People are feeling more lonely now than they ever have been. What are some of the reasons for that, do you think?
I think some of it is that isolation of, I work from home. There's no other people here. This is my form of connection. And when we don't have more than half of our bodies to give us information, we don't take in all of the communication elements that we typically communicate with, because honestly, the visual and the vocal are more powerful than any of the words that we say in terms of getting our message across. And so we're limited in that form of communication. And, when we have in the past picked up a phone, now we text and we, Skype or IM or whatever the tech du jour is, right? What's that? Slack. That's another one that's really big. And there's a lot less visual and vocal connection.
And as we were talking just before we kicked off, you said something to me which really hit home. And you said connection goes through everything that we do. Could you expand on that a little bit more for me?
Yeah, and that's actually the title of my last book, as you said, The Connector's Advantage. It's accomplish whatever it is you're working on faster, easier, better through those relationships. And when we think about connection, I think about it from every perspective, being connected to myself, my brand, my message, being connected to my team, my network, my people, being connected to my organization and its purpose, being a connected leader, being a connected communicator. And when you are connected to the people you work with, to the mission you're working for, you are going to be more engaged, more productive, more loyal, and happier. There's statistics out there that says that close work relationships boost productivity by 50% and predict your happiness on the job. That's the power of connection.
Oh, I love that. And I don't think I really understood the power of connection until the last few years, because prior to that, although I had friends at work, it was very much just seen as colleagues that you work with and you come home. But now that we're living in this really fast paced world, and I think there's a lot of distraction, there's this diminishing attention that we're finding as well. As a facilitator, when I'm running a workshop or even a regular meeting, I'm really now thinking about how do I keep people's attention, because their minds are going to be drifting off. And apparently, the average person's attention span is just 47 seconds. So it's
That's
super
generous.
critical. Yeah, that's probably generous.
It's
Yeah.
about 30 seconds.
Right. Right.
So there's a few different ones. 30 seconds, and it's kind of like you need to keep putting the quarter in the slot machine to keep their attention. They can listen for about 15 minutes, but it'll go in waves, and you can keep somebody maybe seated for up to 2 hours. But I would not test that one.
Oh, wow. So I'd be fascinated to hear about some of that research, because it sounds like there's a lot of science behind this. What are some of the interesting things that you've read in terms of the research on this?
I don't have all those statistics in my head, but when we think about the attention curve, it starts high, it ends high, and in between it drops, right? They always remember first words and last words, and then they forget everything in between. And so your goal as a facilitator, as a speaker, as a communicator, is to create it more like a wave. We understand it's not going to stay up here, and that's okay, right? The idea is, how do you design and communicate in a way that brings it back? And there's lots of ways you can do that. And you can do that with keywords, right? There's 3 things. Number 1, and every time they hear 1, 2, 3, their ears will pop back up. You can do things like highlighting phrases such as, the one thing I want you to get out of this is, the most important thing you can take away from today is, right? Those phrases bring it back up. Silence. When I don't hear sound anymore, my brain goes, wait a minute, what's going on? I'm used to hearing that drone of sound. Humor, questions, reflective thought. I want you all to think right now about, when you have that idea, just give me a nod, right? So physicality increases attention. Movement. I want you guys to turn around and look at the person next to you or behind you. Just having somebody move brings the energy back into their body. So, I mean, I can go on and on and on, but like all of these little things are how we make that attention curve wave.
And it just goes to show that it is quite a complex process trying to keep people engaged, because then you add the other variable that we're also diverse. We have some people that are neurodiverse, and it's how do we cater to everybody's needs and still keep them engaged and hooked?
Beautiful question, Patty. And thank you for asking it as a mother of neurodiverse children. I think it's so important to understand that when you design, when you are facilitating, when you are communicating, you need to think about the differences and the preferences of those that you're communicating with. So, for example, I am a bit extroverted. I can be loud. I'm very animated and expressive. And my youngest child is super introverted, ADHD, right? Asperger's, and needs one thing at a time and it to be quiet and delivered, subtly and things, right? And so understanding how do we flex? And when I say flex, I don't mean change who you are. I'm never going to be the quiet one. But what I can do is be aware of how I'm being received by somebody else by watching their body language, by listening to their cues. And, you can listen with your eyes and your ears. Right? And temporarily, momentarily, adapting and adjusting my style to be more effective with the person I'm communicating with. So when you say it is complex, um, one of the things that I think about as I'm facilitating is there's three types of learners, three ways we learn. Kinesthetic, I learn through the experiential interaction. Visual, I learn by seeing it, and auditory, I learn by hearing it. And when I design, I keep at least two of those things active at all times. And so if you can both hear it and see it, if you can both see it and do it, if you can both hear it and do it, then you are getting everyone, because we all have a primary and a secondary. So you might not be getting everyone's primary, but you'll be getting everyone's either primary or secondary when you include two of those elements. And the other thing to think about is how we enjoy that kinesthetic or that conversational piece. Some people like to be in front of the room and to, share their findings with everybody. And other people want that small group or that one-to-one or one-to-two more intimate experience and have somebody else share it in a larger group. And so giving those different types of learning opportunities, of contributing opportunities. And another thing I want to add, because I know you said you've got a lot of people out there who are communicating in meeting formats. Give people, advance warning. When you have people who internally process versus externally process, and it doesn't always correlate to introvert and extrovert, but it does highly correlate to introvert and extrovert. The introverts are not people who are thinking on the fly, who will jump in, who will speak before they've thought it through. And if you want their contribution, give them the questions in advance. Let them know you are going to depend and rely on them to bring in their thoughts and that you will be asking them. So they are not caught off guard, uncomfortable. They had time to think it through and they can really bring something to the table.
I think that's a piece that we often overlook is the communication before the meeting or the workshop, because we just assume we're going to send an invite out and everyone's going to turn up and they're going to be in the right frame of mind, when actually, like I myself, I need time to analyze and process. And so if somebody had set me the question up front and said, can you just think about this for the meeting that we're going to have next week? This is the big problem we're trying to overcome. It just gives me that time to think, and then I'll turn up. And when they say, let's brainstorm your ideas, I've already processed it, rather than kind of feeling a little bit like, oh my God, there's so much pressure on me now to come up with something that's half valuable for the team. So yeah, I think that's super, super important. Now, on your book, the tagline says 7 mindsets to grow your influence and impact. So could you share a little bit of thinking behind that? Like, are there mindset shifts that we need to make in order to be a better connector?
Really, it's how a connector thinks. And let's see if I can remember all 7 off the top of my head, right? Connectors are open and accepting. They have a clear vision. They trust. They come from a place of abundance. They're social and curious. They're conscientious, and they have a generous spirit. I think I hit all 7. And so when we think about these 7 ways of thinking and being and interacting, they support connection, right? And open and accepting isn't just open and accepting of everybody else. It's open and accepting of ourselves. Remember when I said connect to yourself first? Because if you are not connected to who you are and what you care about and what you want to put out to the world, how is anybody else supposed to connect with you? And we talk a little bit about accepting our unique charms, which right, is a nice way of saying Michelle talks a lot. Michelle can be loud, right? And it is who I am. And sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. And that's what a unique charm is it's something core to who you are, but understanding that sometimes we might need to rein that in.
We often build this mindset that because we work for a corporate, we've got to fit into the mold. And that sometimes means we remove that uniqueness that we have because we're trying to be like everybody else. So I think from what you're saying is actually bring that on, bring it in, and really embrace that difference and your charm and all those things that make you unique.
I believe in embracing our inner unicorn. I also believe in understanding that being authentic isn't about letting it all out everywhere on everyone. It's about knowing who you are and knowing, if you want to connect with others, it isn't just about who you are, but it's how you are with them and what they might need from you. And that fact that you are tuning in and caring enough about somebody else to have that awareness, self and other awareness.
And could we delve into one of your other favorite mindset shifts as well? Could you share maybe a few insights on one of your other favorites?
I mean, they're all my favorites. I'm gonna let you pick. How's that?
I think the trust one was quite interesting because I think all of us want to be liked at work, and especially in the world of work that I work in, where we're building relationships for building better products for which we need trust with our stakeholders. So the stakeholders are going to be the people that are really going to drive the vision for the products we're building. And if we're doing that on their behalf, they need to trust us. And as a facilitator who's then going to facilitate problem solving, etc., building that trust is super important. So how do we do that?
I talked about the 4 pillars of trust. And the first we've already spoken about, authenticity, right? I can't trust somebody who's not being real. The second is vulnerability, because vulnerability leads to credibility. And vulnerability is one of those words that people are like, no, thank you. I don't like that word. And actually, that's how I used to feel about the word myself. But vulnerability isn't about weakness. What I've learned is vulnerability is about openness, a willingness to share of yourself. And I talk to a lot of leaders, and I know we'll talk about it later, but I have a program called Connected Leadership. And when I have CEOs and high-level leaders in this program, and we're talking about what does vulnerability look like, because they're like, I can't do that in my financial firm, in my man's world, and whatever. And I explain that if somebody comes to you, they made a mistake, something didn't go well, you have choices. You can put them in the bad person chair and yell and make them feel even worse, right? Or you can say, let me tell you a story. I've been there. I'm going to make you feel so much better right now because back early in my career, this happened. And this is how I went, fielded it. So the first thing I want you to know is you'll get through this. Now let's talk about how. That's vulnerability in action. That is, I'm not perfect, and I'm willing to share my experiences with you to create a teachable moment, to encourage you, to support you, and to coach you. That's connected. All right, so we've got authenticity, we've got vulnerability, we've got transparency, and we've got consistency. And those are the 4 pillars of trust. And transparency is another one that people balk on. Consistency, everyone gets, right? Because if you're inconsistent, you actually erode trust. But transparency, people are like, well, I can't tell people everything. No, you don't have to be transparent. But what you can tell them is what you can tell them, what you can't tell them, why, and that when you are able to, that you will, so that they don't need to make up stories for themselves, because they will. If you don't fill in those gaps in their thinking, they will fill in those gaps in their thinking, and then they'll share those thinking gaps with other people, convinced that that's the reality of the situation. And then you've got poisoning of the well. You are better off being in communication and being in over communication and being in early communication. And I always talk about being ahead of your communication. I don't love that phrase, don't ask permission, ask for forgiveness. No, I prefer you be ahead of your communication.
One of the things that I've tried to hone over the years is making small talk, especially in those moments where it's not a formal setting. It could be you're walking into a meeting. It could be you met somebody who you work with, could be a senior leader, could be that senior stakeholder, and you're out and about. Like, have you got any tips for small talk? How do you build connection in those situations? Because it could go very badly wrong. Like, I had this with my CEO recently at the Christmas party, and I looked around and it was just me and him stood there. And I was like, oh God, now I'm under the spotlight. And this could be very career limiting. So I've got to make sure I say something sensible to make that small talk. Like, what advice would you have on that?
I have a whole chapter on it in the likability book. Um, one of the things is my older son's a freshman in college, and he's, I guess you'd call it rushing business fraternities. It's not really rushing. Like, you go to these meetings, you meet people, and then you fill out an application, and then you go on interviews. But in a way, it's a networking event. And I suggested he has what I call back pocket questions. Have somewhere between 3 and 7 questions that you like to ask and that you're also willing to answer and share of yourself. So don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. That's the first key of curiosity, right? Don't ask about the sick cat if you don't care about the sick cat. Don't ask about the football game if you don't know anything about football. I hear the puppy. No, I don't. You don't have to mute that. I've got a dog too. See, I love that. If you are an animal lover and there's a topic of conversation. Do you have any pets? If they don't, you'll move on to another question. But if they do, you as an animal lover will have tons to talk about and you won't need to do anything more. I had a client yesterday and my dog started barking because of the skateboarding dog down my street all the time. It's a whole thing. And she's like, oh, let me see the dog. And then she turned her background off and let me see the dog on her bed. And it was all this whole connection. So animals is something you can connect on. But also use the news, not the politics necessarily, but, you can talk about the wildfires or whatever natural disaster is happening because there's always one, right? And then that leads you, I'm a Jersey girl. Hurricane Sandy is still being discussed. And it's almost, we're getting close to a decade later. You can still have conversations about Hurricane Sandy. You can use hypotheticals. I think those are fun. When I used to do book signings, I would say, if you had $10 million in the bank, how would you spend your time? And the fascinating, and people are like, oh, it's a good one. Let me think about that, right? And so having a few of these fun back pocket questions, advice questions, especially when you're with a CEO, it could be like, hey, I've never had an audience with you. And, to get a little piece of advice from you, what's the best advice you've ever been given? Right? You make them feel like you value anything that they say, which you do, right? So we're not being facetious, but we're also tapping into their memory and the connection they have to something. That creates mood memory that they then associate with you, right? The best advice you ever got. What's one thing you would tell somebody who's rising in the ranks of this organization that made the difference for you? Right? Some of those are great, fun back pocket questions, and you can have ones for different situations. And again, there's a whole chapter on it.
I love that phrase you used, mood memories. Never heard that before.
Mood memory is about how you make somebody feel is what stays with them more than anything that you said. They might not remember a word of the conversation, but they remember how they felt in the conversation. And if you have this great conversation with somebody and then you're like, oh, your mood memory goes to the toilet because that's the last thing they feel. All right. So you want to have somebody feel good in that exchange with you, feel listened to, feel valued, feel interested in, right? Felt like you were present with them and not also on your phone at the same time.
And when you were talking there about small talk, reminded me of my son because he's just turned 13, and every night when I put him to bed, still put him to bed, by the way, he's going to be so embarrassed if he ever hears this. The last question he asked me as I walk out is, Dad, what shall I think about? Because he likes to have a thing that he can then focus on, which helps him get to sleep. And I really liked your question there about, well, if you had this much money, like what would you do with it? Because I love those questions because that'll get him thinking about lots of different things. And I'm trying to create a little bank of those because I'm struggling sometimes. I'm like, just think of what you're going to do at school tomorrow. But that's a boring question, Dad. I don't want to think about what I'm going to do at school.
Oh, I've got one for your son.
Okay.
Think about a spot that relaxes you and visualize every sense that you feel while you're in that spot. So for me, I used to visualize this weeping willow next to a lake on a thick, thick patch of grass at the sleepaway camp I went to in the 80s, in the early 80s. And when I couldn't relax, I would visualize myself under that tree with the sun shining, hearing the water of the lake, with the willow tree causing some nice shade, and I would sink. And then I would sometimes say, and I want you to imagine the entire gravitational pull of the earth is right below that patch of grass, making your body heavy and sinking into it. And because it was almost a meditative question, right? Your body felt heavy and you could fall asleep. But finding that spot, you can say, what's the spot today?
Oh, brilliant. That's a golden nugget. That's why I love doing these podcasts. I get parenting advice as well. So
Well, I've written a lot about the fact that motherhood and management, or I should say parenthood and management, are very, very correlated. And the things that we do in one highly relate to the other. For example, good behavior gone unnoticed decreases. Bad behavior gone unnoticed increases. But we are really good at acknowledging bad behavior, and we don't always remember to acknowledge the good. And so I always say, find the good, look for the good. And I would say things like, that was a great job using your napkin. Now my kids are almost out of high school and one's in college, but because when we work in an environment where we expect a certain level, we don't feel that we need to say good job on the minimum expected requirement. But that little bit of recognition, that little bit of appreciation, what increases connection, increases, it's actually one of the top 3 things that lead to job satisfaction, is that feeling that I'm seen and I'm cared about and my impact matters and is noticed. And even if it is as simple as, you know what, you really put that client at ease. I appreciate that. That's not my favorite part and loved having you there. That person's going to feel good. Right? Doesn't have to be, you nailed it and you closed the deal. You put that client at ease. And I noticed.
And so if I take that concept into a workshop environment as a facilitator, would you recommend having those moments in those situations as well? So if you've got a group of people that have generated some really good ideas, would you then suggest we make those small moments of recognition and bake them into the actual session itself, so that during that moment we're actually making people feel good about the things that they're doing in the workshop, rather than saying, oh, let's all brainstorm some ideas. Great. Thank you, team. Let's go on to the next team. What would you advise there?
The phrase that concerned me was bake it in, because when we bake it in, we lose the authenticity of the ingredient, right? It melds with all the other ingredients and we don't taste that one ingredient. So I am sensitive to language. I'm a communications person. So I'm sure that's not the intention that you had when you said that, but I wanted to highlight that thinking, right?
Hmm.
And how that could be interpreted. So the key to recognition and appreciation is the authenticity behind it. And so, um, looking for the good and looking for the small moments of good. It could be like, I love how you guys all really follow directions. I never get that, right? You actually did this brainstorming in silence, and I didn't see any faces going, "Ooh," you know, like, and it could be funny, but it's also real, and it's I noticed and great, and that is a universal appreciation. If you over appreciate small things, people start to be dismissive about it. So, I think you do want to, um, be selective, but, every time I got a question, I'll be like, "Ooh, that one makes me think," or, "Oh, I love that you asked that question," but it has to be real, right? You asked a question before, about the different styles of learning and thinking, and that really hit home for me, and so I really appreciated that you asked the question, I said so. But if I was just gonna be like, "Oh, I love that you asked that question," but there was no why, it doesn't land the same way. And so I really would say, yes, in those workshops, look for those opportunities, build it into your style in your repertoire, but uh, don't overdo it. Allow it to be natural.
Sounds like you've worked with many, many people over the years. I won't ask you for a number, but in terms of some of the most memorable situations, can you share maybe one or two stories about where connection has really helped somebody make some form of transformation, or it's really helped them excel in some way or other? Because I love stories.
You're gonna laugh at this, but when I started my transition, I'm a recovering CPA. So I spent the first decade of my career in finance. I was managing others by the age of 22, which was crazy because nobody told me how to do it, and I did not do it well, and I teach all the mistakes I ever made, so that you don't, not how to make the mistakes and how not to. Um, and so when I started my transition as a facilitator, as a trainer, as a coach, I went to an organization. I said, "Hi, I'm a communications trainer, and I want to train for you." And they looked at my resume. They said, "No, you're a finance trainer." I said, "Hi, I'm a finance trainer. I want to train for you." And so I got started being a finance trainer, and I would take the fear out of finance. And I taught a class called, I think it was management and or accounting and finance for non-financial professionals or managers, something like that. It was prisoners. It was people like in marketing and creative and, anything tech, anything that was not financial related. These people did not want to be there. They hated it. They were scared of it. And they were prisoners in my room. And they would come up and they would say, "I don't want to be here. I can't do this." And I'm like, it was a 3-day class. And I said, "Give me today." I said, "Stay with me today." Because she said, "They want me to take this job and I can't do this job, but they sent me here." I will never forget this woman on day 3 come up to me and say, "I can do it. I'm going to take the job." And that's understanding where somebody is coming from and helping them in a language that they understand. I don't talk about the materiality principle as a principle of accounting and what this means for, decision making. I talk about it as my dad used to make me pick up dirty pennies off the ground because he used to have to do it when he was in the bowling alley every time for a pin, and he'd have to pick up 10 pins to get one pen. And so I would tell these stories, and then I would say, "Okay, so this is how we use this concept. Now I'm going to say bowling alley or used car or Giant's jacket," and they'll tell me the principle. And they'll stay with that story and that principle for the rest of their lives. So it's how do you connect to the people that you are with and communicate in a way that resonates for them, not in the way it makes sense for you. So like that for me, I mean, that's taken me way back, but that was probably one of my earliest, most powerful moments as a facilitator is getting somebody to believe in themselves.
Wow. I mean, just just seeing your body language and hearing your voice change as you were talking that through, I can tell that had huge meaning to you. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to ask you a question that probably should ask you right at the start, but why has this topic been so fascinating for you? Like, why have you almost dedicated your whole career to connection? What's that trigger, and like, why do you
Oh,
do it?
um, it's funny. One of the opening stories of my first book was about how I kind of bit one of my students' heads off because I asked the class, what's the purpose? What is my intention, right? Because we were talking about communication and intention in your communication. The student said, for us to like you. And I was like, no, I don't care. I don't care if you like me. That is not my intention. I was so like averse to the idea. And I could see all of the sparkle drain from his face. And it really stuck with me. And I actually spoke with him like the next class because seeing that change in somebody's expression that you caused, um, the truth is I don't feel like I was always very likable. I have a big personality for a short girl. I'm 4'10". And I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was I was doing that caused people to love me or to hate me, but there was very little in between. And so I wanted to understand my behaviors and how they were having an impact on other people. And that's kind of where the research started. And that's where the first book came from, was really understanding what drives likability, what drives connection, and realizing you can't make anybody like you, but you can enable them to see what is likable about you. And as a facilitator, I would always hyper focus on the one or two people that I wasn't getting, right? I didn't have them. And I wasn't focusing on the 90% of the class that I did have. And as a facilitator, focus on the 90. You're not going to get them all. And that was something I had to learn and had to accept. And that's part of understanding likability. Not everybody's going to receive you the way you want to be received, as long as you are kind of following these mindsets and understanding these drivers of likability and still being true to who you are. That's the best you can do.
Oh, amazing. And I know we're fast approaching time, Michelle, so I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions that I normally end the show on. I didn't give you any pre-warning on this one, just because I think it's often better in the moment to hear the answer. If you could have any superpower to abolish something in the world of work, so something that really knocks you in the world of work, what would that be? And don't worry, we're only going to do it for 24 hours just to make sure it works and it's safe.
Um, my first thought was email. And I don't really mean that. But I think if we could eliminate all forms of communication other than verbal, like voice to voice or face to face, one day a week, we would improve our connection. It's like no email Fridays, no Slack Fridays, no text Fridays, no, if you want to talk to somebody on Friday, you pick up the phone. You can get on Zoom. I'm okay with Zoom. But there has to be a visual or a auditory component to your communication.
Nice.
Never thought about that before.
I mean, I know organizations that have no meetings on certain days just because, people get overwhelmed with work and they never
Figured
actually get
out.
any time. Yeah. So having a day of no emails, that could be an interesting experiment. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. Everybody, let's try it. Let's try one day and then let us know how you get on. That would be super cool.
And let me know. I want to know too.
For sure. Could even pick up the phone and tell you. That would be even better. And Michelle, if people want to get in touch with you and find out about the great work that you do, how can they do that? And you mentioned there's a upcoming course as well that you're going to be sharing with us.
Yes, I would love to
Details
share
about
that with your audience. And I also want to give your audience a special discount, which I know you'll put in the show notes. But The Connected Leader course is I call semi-synchronous. We have a cohort experience because I want connection, right? You come through the program. Our spring cohort will kick off in April, so you can enroll now. You come through the program with about a dozen, other participants where you will build connection and relationship with those people. We have 3 live sessions. There's about 25 short form videos, less than 5 minutes apiece. There's about 8 activities that really kind of solidify the work. It is, I'll send you to the website in your show notes. You'll hear the rave reviews. It is powerful, and it feeds into a community of other connected leaders to grow and build your own network. And that's called the Connected Leader course. It's connectedleaderclub.com, and then you can click on the course. That'll be in the show notes. And your early bird special is EB300 to get $300 off the course. So that's one place to find me. The other place for everything else is just my full name, Michelle with 2 L's, Tillis, Tillis, Lederman, Lederman.com. From there, you can get to my weekly articles. I have a LinkedIn newsletter blog thing you can get to, my YouTube channel, and just everything else that you want to get to from there, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, all of that from my website. So I hope I hear from you, and please tell me that you heard from me on the Superpower School podcast. That is like tongue twister.
I know. Well, you gave me lots of tongue twisters at the start, so I'm just getting my own back now, Michelle. So there we go. But no, thank you so much for sharing that. And look, no one's got any excuse not to get connected now because they've got so many channels, so many ways that they can contact you. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you over this last hour or so, and I've certainly learned a lot. And I've really liked the way you've got your books behind you, right? I think that's a great way of actually showing people and showcasing the great work that you do rather than my messy shelf behind me. So yeah, thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.